Most bands build their careers around music. Mötley Crüe built theirs around identity. From the very beginning, they understood something many artists learned too late. People don't just follow songs, they follow stories, attitudes, and promises. The problem is, once you promise chaos, excess, and danger, you are expected to deliver it every single night. And sooner or later, that price has to be paid. Los Angeles, in the 1970s, wasn't a romantic music city filled with creative freedom. It was a pressure cooker. Hundreds of bands competed for attention in overcrowded clubs where talent alone rarely stood out. What mattered was who looked different, who felt dangerous, and who could be remembered after one song. Nikki Sixx arrived in that environment with almost no money and very little formal musical training, but with a sharp understanding of how perception worked. He didn't just want to be in a band. He wanted to construct something that looked larger than life before anyone even heard the music. When he met Tommy Lee, the connection wasn't built on disciplined or shared musical philosophy. It was built on ambition, appetite, and a shared willingness to push things further than most people around them dared to. That foundation would define everything that followed. When Vince Neil joined as a frontman and Mick Mars completed the lineup, the band finally had its missing pieces. Not because they suddenly became virtuosic musicians, but because their combined presence created a visual identity that demanded attention. Mötley Crüe understood that image wasn't decoration, it was communication. Their use of leather, makeup, high heels, and provocative styling wasn't about fashion trends. It was about deliberately blurring lines and making conservative audiences uncomfortable. This wasn't accidental rebellion, it was strategy. They wanted to look like a band parents would hate before hearing a single note, because controversy guaranteed visibility in a city where being ignored was a death sentence. Their debut album, Too Fast for Love, didn't succeed because it was technically flawless. It succeeded because it felt raw, reckless, and unapologetic. As their audience grew, something dangerous began to take shape. The band started receiving praise not just for the music, but for how hard they partied, how extreme their lifestyle appeared, and how little restraint they showed. Slowly, excess stopped being a private behavior and became part of the band. The unspoken message was clear. If you lived dangerously, you were authentic, and if you didn't, you were pretending. That idea would follow them for decades. By the mid-1980s, Mötley Crüe had achieved what most bands only imagine. Major label success, global tours, and financial freedom removed nearly every external limitation. But freedom without structure doesn't create stability. It creates acceleration. Nobody told them to slow down, because nobody wanted the machine to stop. Record labels profited, promoters benefited, and fans consumed the spectacle without questioning the cost. The band members themselves began confusing momentum with control. As long as the shows sold out and the albums charted, it felt like everything was working, even when it clearly wasn't. The illusion cracked violently in 1984 when Vince Neil was involved in a drunk driving accident that killed Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle. This wasn't an abstract cautionary tale. It was irreversible reality. For a brief moment, the myth of invincibility collapsed, but instead of forcing a reckoning, the industry quietly moved forward. Tours continued, releases followed, the narrative resumed. Because acknowledging vulnerability would have meant questioning the very image that made Mötley Crüe profitable. It's tempting to explain Mötley Crüe's struggles as individual weakness. That explanation is convenient and incomplete. Addiction thrived because it was normalized, rewarded, and protected by the system around them. Access wasn't discouraged, it was expected. Nikki Sixx's near-fatal heroin overdose in 1987 exposes how deep that system ran. He was clinically dead before being revived. Survival should have marked a turning point. Instead, it highlighted a darker truth. Escaping addiction meant dismantling the identity the band has built, and that felt more dangerous than continuing. By the early 1990s, cultural winds shifted. Grunge stripped away glamour and exposed artificiality. What once felt rebellious now looked manufactured. Internal conflicts escalated, and Vince Neil's departure reflected deeper fractures that had been ignored for years. Without the shared illusion, the band struggled to define itself. This was no longer chaos as fuel. This was chaos as erosion. Mötley Crüe didn't vanish. They reframed themselves. Through reunions, autobiographies, and documentaries, they reclaimed control over their narrative. By openly discussing their failures, they transformed scandals into lessons and mythology into context. The chaos didn't disappear, but it was finally acknowledged instead of worshipped. Mötley Crüe proved that image can open doors faster than talent alone. But they also proved that living inside an image has consequences. Success doesn't change who you are, it amplifies it. And when excess becomes expectation, survival becomes the real challenge. Their legacy isn't just loud music and wild stories. It's a warning about what happens when chaos stops being a face and becomes a brand.